Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Maddie and today I'm going to be giving you guys some recommendations because I have not done a book wrap up since May. So May, June, July. I have 25 books, I believe, to recommend you guys. The books that I've read since May, I've had very good luck with. And I do just want to say, this video is the first video I'm filming in front of my new bookshelves, but I want to get a big comfy reading chair. So if you guys have any recommendations for chairs that I can kind of put in front of my bookshelves to film and to read and to relax, please comment down below. I do own most of these books that I'm going to talk about, but I'm not going to grab them off my shelves because I did just put these bookshelves up. They're nice and organized. I will deconstruct it later, and for future recommendations I'll pull them off, but right now they're just pretty. They're sitting up there. I don't want to touch them. But I am going to talk about these books kind of in chronological order. So we're going to go all the way back to May. I read The Push, and this book was super eerie. This book made me never want to have kids. I did give it 4 out of 5 stars. I'm not typically a thriller, mystery, psychological thriller book reader or movie watcher or TV show. I'm just not into it. But this one was 50% off at Barnes & Noble, so I said, okay, fine. Honestly, it was a terrifying scenario dealing with a mother and a daughter. I won't go into details because I don't want to spoil it, but I will give you guys a little hint, okay? The mother was very, very paranoid. And the whole book, you're trying to decide whether she's being too paranoid or if she's actually correct. And it is very, very good. Again, terrifies me to have a child. Great birth control though. A bonus is that it was really short, so I got through it really quick and I could not put it down because every single page was packed with juicy, eerie stuff. The next book is actually sitting right behind me, Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Let's give a quick recap. I've read 3 of her books, like most people have: Beach Read, People We Meet on Vacation, and now Book Lovers. If I had to tier rank them, I would say People We Meet on Vacation goes first, Beach Read is second, and Book Lovers is sadly not my favorite. I gave Book Lovers 3.5 out of 5 stars. I'm gonna read straight from my Goodreads review. So if you have a Goodreads, go be my friend on there so you can kind of get the first inside scoop of my thoughts on the books that I read. I'm gonna go through a pros and cons list. Let's go through the good stuff first. Such a good ending. This was probably one of my favorite, like, top 10 romance endings of all time. I won't spoil it for you guys. It was just very sweet and reminded me a lot of those 90s Hallmark rom-com movies. Exactly what I'm into. Those are like my comfort movies. That was a big plus. Another thing is that it had that Gilmore Girls small town vibe, and Gilmore Girls is one of my favorite TV shows, so it ended up working out really well. I loved the setting that the book was taking place in. Cons, let's go over the list of some of the negative stuff in my opinion. I personally cannot relate to our main character Nora. She had that kind of shark mentality about going through life. She was a go-getter. She didn't take no for an answer. I'm a go-getter, okay? But like, she was just a little too strict and harsh. She is a book editor or somewhere along the lines. Honestly, I read this 3 months ago, so I don't quite remember what her job is, but she ends up meeting Charlie. Charlie is just like her. He is a shark. He has that shark mentality. And it's just those people who are super hardcore, take their job very seriously. Their job is their life. They basically have no fun, but they love it. I just couldn't really relate to her, so it was the book was kind of slow to get me into. It took me a little bit to get into this book. In the middle of the book, I wanted Charlie to try a little bit harder. He seemed a little just like, sure, I'll be with you. Like, it didn't seem like he really wanted to be with Nora. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I just didn't really like Charlie. And my last con is that it was a really big family-based book. Nora was very in tune with her sister the whole book, and honestly, a majority of the book was their relationship. You didn't see a lot of Nora and Charlie for a big part of the book, and that to me wasn't what I was looking for. So if you want that family aspect, this is a great book. The next 3 books that I'm going to talk about, I actually did reading vlogs on for a series that I did called Tearjerkers, books that make you tear up or cry, or books that are supposed to make you emotional in some way. And I did vlogs on all 3 of these next books. So if you want an in-depth review, just go watch those videos. I'll link them down below. The first book was A Thousand Boy Kisses by Tilly Cole. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. I cried a majority of this book. Again, I have a vlog on it if you want to go watch it. In the first chapter, I actually cried. There was a part with a grandparent and I related a lot to that, so I bawled my eyes out on like page 12. If I had to describe this book in 3 words, it would be sweet, sad, and wholesome. But my biggest pet peeve about this book is the extreme that Tilly Cole went to make this a grumpy sunshine. Poppy was way too sunshiny. She was in the worst case scenario for any teenager, and she was just in such a good mood about the whole thing, and I didn't really think that was very realistic. And same with Rune. He was the complete opposite. He was too grumpy. It just seemed a tad unrealistic for 1, the situation that they were in, and 2, for the age that they were. 2 teenagers were, I think, like 15 and 16. They were very, very young, and their love for each other was extreme. And it was just every aspect of the book seemed a little too extreme. That's why it didn't get 5 stars for me. Book number 4, I'm not going to linger on this book too much because it was not my favorite book that I've read. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. Again, I do have a vlog on this and there's not much to say about it. I just thought that it portrayed the situation that the whole book revolves around. I thought it portrayed it in a really bad light. I don't think it brought awareness to the situation at all. That's a major trigger warning there. There is a sexual assault and rape in this book. The 5th book I ended up giving 5 stars, and that is Archer's Voice. I was really excited to pick this book up because of how much hype is surrounding it. I'm going to talk about the parts that I didn't like about this book first so I can get those out of the way. There wasn't much, but I will say this book was incredibly sad. Both the main characters went through something very, very traumatic. But when the end came and when the big reveal was made, I don't know how to sound like not like a douche when I say this, but it just didn't seem that sad to me. It was a very, very sad scenario, but maybe the way it was written, I didn't cling on to it and bawl my eyes out like everyone said I would. I did tear up. It was a sad book, but I did not like weep like I did in A Thousand Boy Kisses. And my last irk about this book is that the twist at the end was kind of like untwisted. I don't know how to better describe that, but I thought that the end would be very, very different. So that was my only other irk. I won't obviously say what the plot twist was or the ending was, but I just did not like how the end was executed. And I do just really quick want to talk about Archer, our main character. He's not your typical alpha male that is portrayed in all of the books that I usually read. He's a big softie, he's very quiet, he's very tender. In this book, I liked it a lot better than I thought I would for a main male character. So if you're wanting a different side of a main character, Archer's a good one to read about. The 6th book was kind of random actually. I picked it up on the whim one day. I was with my family at a drive-in movie and we had to wait like an hour and a half to 2 hours for the sun to set before the movie could start. So I went on the Libby app and just found a book to read. And this damn fly. That book is Ready Player One. And I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I was actually with my younger brother and he said he had read it. I think he said he had read it, or was that my older brother? One of my brothers had read it, so they recommended it. It was a really scary reality that honestly seemed pretty realistic for our world and like it could happen. It reminded me a little bit of Wall-E. I honestly could see this book coming to reality in the next like 20 plus years, maybe even sooner. I don't know if I'll read the 2nd book. What I thought made this book really, really cool is all the references to the 80s like humor, movies, TV shows, and music element to it was really unique and I liked that a lot. The 7th book I read was 7 Days in June and I give this book 4 out of 5 stars. It was a great book to start out the month of June. This book is exactly what I was looking for with a second chance romance. I've read 2 or 3 second chance romances this year and I have not really loved them. This one I thought did it really, really well. Eva and Shane are our main characters and there was a lot of hesitation between the love between the two because they had issues in the past, dealing with something, had a big falling out and then rekindled, obviously in this book. But you could really tell that they loved each other throughout each page, even with that little bit of hesitation from each side. I didn't really love the cliche miscommunication trope in this book. I thought that if I was Eva, I mean, honestly, everyone's a little bit different, but they waited, I think, like 10 or more years to rekindle just due to one little incident that happened at night, like when they were teenagers. Like it didn't seem that realistic to me. Why would you go that long without talking to someone? It was just a very, very big miscommunication trope that I wasn't a big fan of. And the problem added on to that is that the problem that they miscommunicated about for 10 plus years was fixed in like 2 pages, and it just didn't seem like that was either that wasn't a realistic timeline to fix the problem, or they waited all this time for nothing. The 8th book is Scarred, and this is by Emily McIntyre. I read what is that one? What is that book called? It's right here. I read Hooked from Emily McIntyre earlier this year, but Scarred was my favorite out of Emily McIntyre's little fractured fairy tales. Hooked represented Peter Pan, a fractured fairy tale version. Scarred represents the Lion King, and you follow Scar, the main character. Well, his name isn't Scar, his name is Tristan, and he represents Scar in The Lion King. I'm not going to go too far into detail on this book. I think that you should just pick up Emily McIntyre in general. Beware of the trigger warnings, definitely look them up. Even like in the front page, she says like, this is not for the faint of heart, like don't read this book. Sometimes they're gory, they're very, very sexual and erotic. I will say Tristan and Sarah were probably the horniest characters that I've read ever, so just be aware of that when you go into her books. The 9th book is Terms and Conditions by Lauren Asher. I gave this book 4.5 stars out of 5. Declan and Iris are the power couple in this series so far. It was such an entertaining and fast-paced book. I would totally recommend this. If you liked the fine print, obviously I think you should pick this up. But if you haven't read the fine print, that is the first one to this series. I think there's a 3rd book coming out because there are 3 brothers that this series is about. I liked the fine print a little bit more. I think I rated it 5 out of 5 stars. But this one, I thought the tropes were a lot better. You've got to read it to really find out, but this book made me laugh a lot more than the first one, and there were a lot more. I remember in the fine print there was the sick trope where someone gets sick and then they have to be taken care of. I don't really like that trope, so the tropes in Terms and Conditions, in my opinion, were a lot better. The next book is One True Loves. Did I do a video on this? One True Loves is a horrifying scenario for any newlywed to be in. I myself am a newlywed, and if this scenario happened to me, I don't know how it would go on. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. Emma, our main character, was absolutely not my favorite character that I've ever read. I thought she was extremely hurtful and selfish at times to one of the other main characters in this book, and to me that kind of broke my heart for that main character. Some of the decisions she made really hurt me also, and I don't think as a reader I could move on from that. I thought she could have done a lot differently. Although in the end I thought her decision was tough, I could understand her reasoning. I didn't love her decision, but I could totally understand the predicament that she was in. It seemed very, very chaotic and stressful, and I could not imagine being in that scenario myself, so I give her props for handling it at all. This video is supposed to be a book recommendation video. I don't know if I would recommend this to many people. I think I would just save yourself the hurt and the questioning of what would I do, because the whole time I was thinking what would I do, and it took a mental toll. It is a very, very hard, challenging thing to think about. Basically, Emma gets married, her husband disappears for a few years. She believes that he is dead. She moves on. Then she finds out that her husband hasn't been dead, and he comes back and is like, hey, I'm back, I'm alive. But she has already moved on. It's a few years later, she's engaged again, and she has to choose basically, and it was a no for me. That's why I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I think I would have given it 4, but the fact that I didn't really love Emma, and the fact that like, why would I put myself through reading this book after I was just married, it was a bad choice at the time. The next book was a little different from the previous book, The Gilded Wolves. I give this book 3 out of 5 stars also. I saw someone's review on this on Goodreads, and it says like, you shouldn't compare this at all to Six of Crows. I kind of disagree. It's very comparable to Six of Crows. I'm pretty sure it's 6 main characters in the Gilded Wolves. There's main characters that represent the Six of Crows main characters almost identically. Like, they have very, very similar tropes and powers and elements to them that match Six of Crows really well. I'm not comparing the plots because the plots are very different, but they do go through kind of like a heist scenario in this. They actually go through 3 acquisitions in the Gilded Wolves, and each one was executed the same. It was really repetitive and, in my opinion, kind of boring. I was not into it. Now, a lot of people are going to hate me for that because I know this is a really popular book. There also were a lot of action scenes in this book, and I couldn't quite keep up because, one, there was a lot going on. The setting was always described very well when nothing was going on, but when they were doing something or trying to get something and there was action, go, 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 the setting, I could not grasp where they were or how they were moving or what they were doing as a team. Didn't love that aspect. One thing I did love is the humor. I thought that it was really funny. Like, this book was genuinely funny at times and I laughed out loud. I probably will continue the series, but I'm not in any rush to right now. The next book I read was The Shadow of the Wind. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm really surprised I did because it's not my typical read. I actually bought it last year during this 7 bookstores in 7 days video. It was kind of just a shelf filler for a little bit, but I'm happy I read it. Happy I got it off my TBR. I found it really entertaining. It's about our main character whose dad takes him to a library and says, hey, pick out a book and that book is going to be yours. You're going to own this book and it's going to stay on the shelf, but it's going to be yours, because there was some secret library society. He goes, he finds the book, he reads it, he falls in love with this one book, he keeps it on that shelf, and he tries to find other books from this author and finds out that this author's books have been either ruined, he can't find them anywhere, no one's really heard of this author, and he goes through and just kind of pieces together little things. It's kind of a mystery. There's a lot of other main characters involved that honestly brought a lot of light to the book because it was kind of a, not dark book, but it was dreary. Like, I would describe it as like a rainy day book. Like, it wasn't very sunshiny at all. I 110% recommend the audiobook. I read the book when I could, and I listened to the book a lot, and the narrator was so wonderful. Like, a lot of music was added and a lot of different voices were added. The audiobook, I could not recommend more. The next book is a very, very popular one right now. It was Every Summer After. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. Don't hate me. I think this is a better version of Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. Very similar. It's that time hop. You are jumping back in time to when they're teenagers to present day when they're adults and they're brought back together for some reason. It is a second chance romance, and I thought that it was done beautifully. Even though that Sam and Percy, our main characters, had a lot of frustrating moments, as a reader I found them very frustrating, I still found their love and friendship so raw and real. I was obsessed with the past chapters. Like, when they were teenagers, I was in love with the chapters when they were still teenagers. It was done so well, and just, they were so cute and so sweet to each other that I wish I had a lake house that I could go to and meet a cute boy. And the main conflict at the end was foreshadowed a lot, but I hated it. It made me feel really dirty, and it did not make me feel good at all. I thought that it did add a lot to the book because it made you rethink every scenario that you had previously read. I felt betrayed at the end of the book, but in a good, like, it was still a very, very good book. That's why I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I didn't like what happened, but the ending was wonderful. Okay, and the next book is actually Emily McIntyre's 3rd book, Wretched, and this is loosely based Fractured Fairy Tale on Wizard of Oz. I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars, so it wasn't my favorite one out of the 3 books that I've read from her, but still fun, entertaining, sexy. All of her books that I've read have been extremely well done when it comes to the sex scenes. I did like the aspect of this book, like that we had an undercover cop in this one. It was more modern, I think, because Scarred definitely was not set in at least our time, but this one was definitely a more modern take on her book, and compared to her other books, this one was not my favorite. It was also her shortest book that I've read, so there wasn't a lot of attachment to the characters. The next book, we are on book 15, I believe, was Pestilence, and this is one of the Four Horsemen books. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, but now that I'm thinking about it, you know when your ratings can kind of change based off your mood, I don't know if I would rate this 3.5, like 3.5, or 4. I'm not sure, because I'm not in a rush to read the other books, and I think that's not a good sign sometimes when it comes to books. Like, usually if I'm into a series, I'm like, where's the next book? Like, I want to read it. But Pestilence is about a 4 horsemen, Pestilence, who comes down to set plague to the earth, wipe out as many people as he can, so his brothers, the other 3 horsemen, can come down and wage war and whatever the other ones are. Fuck. What are the other ones? Basically, it's a few years post-apocalyptic. The world has ended, and people are gathered in communities, and this one community / girl named Sarah decides to try and kill Pestilence, because obviously no one wants their world to end, and she thinks Pestilence is the bad guy who she should kill. So she tries to kill him in a very brutal way, and he basically grabs her and keeps her captive. So it's a little bit Stockholm syndrome-y, because she does end up falling in love with him, and he's like, why do I kind of have these feelings? What are feelings? I'm this godly creature. Why do I feel this way towards a mortal? Like, that's kind of the whole book. They're constantly debating between morals, and it was entertaining, but kind of like another book that I already talked about, it's a little repetitive. Like, everything that they did, they would ride their horse to this one house, stay there for a night, argue a little bit about what's right and what's wrong, and like why Pestilence shouldn't kill mortals, and then they would ride to another house and stay there for the night, just because he's spreading this disease and he like has her captive. So I thought it was a little repetitive, but I did like the book. Like, I want to read the other ones. I thought this one was very entertaining and a really like interesting take on the Four Horsemen. I don't know if I'd give it 3 or 4. So the next 5 books are in a series, and I'm not going to talk about each one individually. That would just take way too long. I read Savage Lands. I know there's a 6th book, but I have not picked it up yet because I was listening to the Savage Land series because I was moving to Colorado. So we were in the U-Haul driving out here. I was in the hotel at night. I didn't want to physically read anything, and the books right now are really expensive. So I didn't want to buy all 5 books yet. So I listened to 5 of them. And the 6th book doesn't come out on Audible until October, even though that it came out in May. So I have to wait till October to listen to the last book. Is the main character named Brexley? I believe. Let me look it up because I don't want to be wrong on that. Savage Lands is about Brexley and Warwick, and I'm not going into detail about this, but I do want to tell you, if you liked ACOTAR, if you liked From Blood and Ash, if you like any book with fae in it, you will love this series. It's comparable to those big popular series, but I will say it has that, I don't want to sound rude, but that underdeveloped feeling, because so much of the same happened. They get captured every other chapter by someone new. And there were about, I think I counted at one point, there were 16 characters. Like, main characters that you had to keep up with, because there was like one group who were kind of the humans that were against the Fae group, but this Fae group had a mixed group over here in Prague or something, and then this group was in Budapest. Like, it was very there was a lot of groups, and Brexley, our main character, kind of doesn't have a group. She was in the human group, and now she's bouncing all around. She doesn't know what team to be on, and that's kind of the whole journey. She's literally bouncing back and forth with this guy named Warwick, who refuses to admit that he loves her, and then eventually does. So it's It's a really good series. I will say it was a bit of a slow burn on the smutty side. You got a lot of sexual tension in the first 2 or 3 books, but I don't think anything really happened until the 3rd book. So, but again, I was into it. I was really into the plot. I thought the first book was probably the best one, but I've rated all of them 4 out of 5 stars because I liked them, but I didn't like fall in love with any one of them in particular. They all kind of seemed the same to me. I kind of think that she could have just smushed all of the books together into like 3 books or like 1 big book. These Hollow Vows and These Twisted Bonds, I finished These Twisted Bonds about 5 minutes before I started this video. When I was reading These Hollow Vows at first, what did I give These Hollow Vows? I think I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars, and I gave These Twisted Bonds 4 out of 5 stars because the first book reminded me a lot of The Cruel Prince mixed with The Selection. You're set Cruel Prince vibes. She's in the human world. Her sister gets captured and taken to the Fae world. And obviously, being the very like protective sister she is, Aubriella goes to the Fae world to save her sister, and then obviously gets sucked up in this world and meets 2 Fae boys, and now she's stuck in the middle. So it is a love triangle, and it is the most frustrating love triangle ever because you know who's the end goal is, but you have to get through the first book to get to the end goal boy. So it was a little frustrating on that aspect because as a reader you're rooting for one of the dudes the whole time, and then stuff happens. So I don't want to spoil that. These Twisted Bonds, again, I just finished reading it. So good. I thought it picked up really quick. I thought that it was super fast paced. Misha, one of the main characters, is my new book boyfriend. He's amazing in this book. I was very, very thrilled with the read of this sequel, and I'm mad that it's not a trilogy now. I thought that it could have been spread out a little bit more. I think the last 40% could have been dragged out a little bit more because it happened so quick, and the twist at the end, or the little, I don't want to call it a conflict, the twist at the end was rushed. I thought that could have been played out way longer. But I did end up liking These Twisted Bonds more. It is a brand new release. I think it released last week as of this video release date. If you liked The Cruel Prince, I think you'll like this one. And the last book. I read this, I finished this yesterday. It is The Cheat Sheet. This is the cheesiest romance you'll ever read. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars though, and let me tell you why, okay? Because I saw some really negative reviews because it was so cheesy. It was very cringy at the beginning. There were a lot of parts where I was like, the inner dialogue was way, way, way too young. They're like in their 30s or like upper 20s, but they acted so young. They acted like teenagers because of the way that they talked in their head. Not saying that's a bad thing, I guess, because I mean, I still feel like I'm 13, but I just didn't really love how cringy it was at times. But this book is kind of my cup of tea. I loved it. It reminded me of The Game Plan a little bit because he's a football player, she's a ballerina, and The Rock and his love interest in The Game Plan. But I did think the ending was super cheesy and super cute. I'm not going to go into the plot because there really wasn't one. It's just about 2 best friends who have loved each other for like 7-8 years, and he ends up writing a cheat sheet to try and get her to like fall in love with him, even though that she's already in love with him. So it's just like this whole thing. They just don't communicate. I don't understand what is wrong with these main characters who don't communicate. They just needed to talk. They literally just needed to sit down as friends and talk, you know? Hallmark movie 100% could make millions off of this book. I think that was 24 books, but I'm gonna let it go. I am so tired from filming that. That was a lot to talk about. That is it for this video. That is my May, June, and July wrap up. It is July 25th right now, and I'm about to start a book, but I'm doing a reading vlog on it, so you guys will see that in the next few weeks. But that is it for this video. And if you want to leave any recommendations down below for me to read, go ahead and comment that, and also comment reading chairs like I said earlier. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.